Hello, my name is Will Vaughan and I'm a member of the Cary History Society. In this video I'm going to talk to you about one of the most remarkable documents associated with the town. This is the map made about 340 years ago in the late 17th century of the Manor of Castle Cary. I'm standing beside a replica of it. The original is in the British Library in London. It is hand-painted and drawn on vellum. Vellum, as I expect you know, is made from calf skins and is used often for drawing and writing on documents that have a particular importance. Because it's made of calf skin, it comes in relatively small sizes, and this, as you can see, is a pretty large map. So in fact, there's had to use several calf skins sewn together, and you can see a sign of that in some of the lines that you can see actually in the map itself. The map covers, as I say, the Manor of Cary. It has a number of other interesting small details that I'll talk about later. Perhaps you can see there that there's a cartouche at the top, and then there's a little drawing down here, and then there is a little compass there. I'll talk about those details later. The other thing I'd like to draw attention to here, because it's such an unusual feature, is the existence of all these columns, which you can see, which have the names of all the people living in Cary at the time who either owned or rented property. This is of great interest for historians because we can find out an awful lot about the people living in Cary from that. People have been living in Cary for centuries, thousands of years in fact, but this is the first visual record that we have of the town. It's also one of the most elaborate and most detailed. Before I go any further, perhaps I should explain that the Manor of Cary is not quite the same as the town. The manor in the Middle Ages comprised not just the town of Cary, but also the neighbouring villages of Ansford and Hadspent. There's a grand ornamental cartouche at the top of the map. This proclaims it as an accurate record of the manor, and this indeed it seems to be. Every piece of land is shown on the map, named and accurately measured. Every building is there, their plans outlined in red. There's also every footpath and road, together with rivers, streams and ponds. You really could find your way about the manor with this map. It must have taken months, if not years, to create. Its creator, John Ward, seems to have been proud of his achievement. He describes himself as a teacher of ye mathematics in the cartouche on the map, thus drawing attention to his ability to handle measurements and numbers. Furthermore, he has added to the map a picture of an exotic turbaned figure holding instruments necessary for the kind of precise survey that the map had involved. In his right hand is a stick with a sliding crossbar known as a Jacob's staff, commonly used at the time for measuring distances and elevations. He is accompanied by two pupils or apprentices who are busy about their calculations. They are standing on top of a calibrated ruler that gives the scale of the map in chains. For good measure, he also added a splendid ornamental compass indicating the map's orientation. Much of the town shown in this map is still recognizable today. Here's the central part. The main road runs from the church in the south up through 4th Street, the principal shopping area, to the market square, and then curves up northwards through the High Street. Here is the market square with Cary's principal hostelry, the George Hotel. This building dates back to the 15th century. However, the map also shows us much that is lost. The largest building to have gone is this big cruciform structure that was at the other end of the main street to the George. This is the manor house that was pulled down in the 19th century. At the time of the map, it was still the hub of the community. Originally, the lord of the manor would have lived there, but by the 17th century, it was a steward who occupied it and managed the estate. This is where the daily running of the community would have taken place. The townspeople would have come to confirm agreements and settle their dues. It was also the place where the local court was held. While giving an overall view of Cary at this time, the map does have a particular focus. Most attention is paid to the agricultural land. As well as being given its name, each field is inscribed with some intriguing numbers and letters. These tell you how the land was used, what terms it was held on, and who it was who either owned or rented it. The one you are looking at is called Bean Close. It lies by the River Cary, near the hamlet of Cock Hill. Like many of the fields in Cary, it is very much the same today as it was 300 years ago. Here it is, together with a recent shot of it from Google Earth. This certainly confirms how accurate John Ward was in his measurements. And here, for the record, is the site from the ground. On the map, Bean Close is inscribed with the letters PC. The P indicates the land was being used for pasture, that is, for grazing animals, typically sheep or cattle. If it had had an A, it would have meant it was arable, that is, for growing crops. The other major use of fields was orchards, then as now Somerset was famous for these. In addition, the map marks the areas of common land, which all members of the community could use to graze their livestock. Here is one. This is South Common Field, which, as the name implies, was on the southern boundary of the manor on the road to Wincanton. The next letter is Bean Close. C tells us the terms on which the land was held. C stands for copyhold. This was a medieval tenancy form that required the paying of rent and service to the lord, which had the advantage to the tenant that they had the right to assign their rights to a successor. This meant that a family could keep possession of the property through generations, as frequently happened. As well as letters, each field bears a number. That on Bean Close is 27. This indicates the person who owned or rented the land. Their names are listed against their numbers around the edge of the map, together with the land they possessed and the measurements of the size of each field. This is one of the most remarkable features of the map, for it gives us the identities of all those in Cary at the time who either owned or ran the farms and small holdings. There were 151 in all. Many of the names are familiar today. Clothier, for example, is one of the most prominent. From this information, it is possible to reconstruct all the farms and small holdings in Cary at the time. The 27 on Bean Close indicates that it was held by the person who was responsible for the settlement today known as Lower Cock Hill Farm. You can see on the map the main house and the barn and stables as they are today. Checking the number on the list, we can find the occupier of Lower Cock Hill Farm was one Anne Clover, who held it copyhold. Anne's family, more usually referred to as Clothier, had occupied the farm for at least a century. From the number 27, it is also possible to find all the other fields Anne held, as can be seen marked up in this plan. Altogether, she had just over 80 acres, quite a substantial holding for that time. The fields were quite distributed, probably because individual ones were inherited from different family members at different times. This was quite common in feudal societies like that of Cary at the time. The information about land usage that this map provides is the kind that is usually found in estate maps of the period. Here, for example, is a slightly later map of the Butterbuck estate in Yorkshire, which has names and numbers as in the Cary map. Such maps had a practical use from the point of view of the lord of the manor, as it told him who held what and what their commitments were. We might conclude from this that the Cary map was a regular estate map, but there are a couple of features in it that make it different from these. The first is that the lord of the manor is not mentioned. Usually, the owner of an estate was given in the cartouche or title of the map, as is seen in the Yorkshire estate I compared it with, where J. Batty was named as the owner. But in the cartouche of the Cary map, only its maker, John Ward, is named. This is highly unusual. The reason is probably because the ownership of the manor was in transition. From the names mentioned in the map, it seems that it was made circa 1684. This is the time when the manor was up for sale. It was bought by two London lawyers, Anthony Ettrick and William Player. Probably the map was commissioned by them, so they could estimate the value of what they were proposing to buy. The fact that the map maker, John Ward, was also working in London strengthens the supposition. If the map was commissioned to help the sale, this would explain another highly unusual feature. This is that the names of all the people who held property in Cary is actually recorded on the map itself. Normally, with estate maps, the numbers are written on the land, but the name they referred to was listed in a separate account book. This was, after all, the only practical way of keeping the map up to date. As people moved on, the changes could be made to the book. This could not happen if the names were actually written on the map itself. Clearly, this map was recording Cary at one point in time, rather than providing a practical long-term guide for the management of the manor. What might seem as a limitation to the map then is now one of its principal assets. In the case of many estate maps, the account book has frequently gone missing, so the names involved are no longer known. In the Cary map, we have the names secure on the map itself, and thus a snapshot of land ownership in the manor at a particular time. It was, in fact, a highly significant time, for when the manor was sold, a link was broken that had reached right back to the Norman conquest. There was no longer a feudal lord running the estate in the traditional manner. Cary had been taken over by speculators. Gradually, the manor was broken up. The new owners were keen to sell off properties where possible, preferring ready cash, it would seem, to tedious rent collecting. One of the lawyers, William Player, did take up residence. But he did not live in the old manor in the centre of town. Instead, he moved outside to Hadspin. Here he built a grand new house in the classical style and laid out an extensive estate, partly enclosing land that had formerly been for common use. What happened to the map after the sale of the manor of Cary is unclear. All that is known is that it was bought from a dealer by the British Museum in 1832 and was subsequently passed on to the British Library. Presumably Player or one of his successors discarded it when it no longer had a practical use for them. This map is to be treasured nowadays, perhaps most of all, for giving us a detailed image of Castle Cary when it was still essentially a feudal community, and just before that was about to change.